Hi, welcome everybody. It's Magnanimous Karuna on the Different I Am show. And today I'm going to be speaking with Andy. He lives in San Francisco and is the founder of the Urban Adventure Club. And it's a great company. I'm going to let him talk to you about it. And he's an entrepreneur, a recent father, and a great human being. So, welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Karuna. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. So you have this amazing company, but before we get to that, I want to ask you one question for the audience. Tell me something you just love doing.
I love to cook. I It's something that may be surprising to a lot of people. So in my family, I cook pretty much all our meals. It's something that I just learned from my mom growing up. She would always make me help her in the kitchen. So I learned a lot of nice skills and cooking skills from her. So that carried on when I lived alone. I would cook for myself and it developed into a passion. I have a pretty crazy spice collection. I have probably like 3 drawers full of just spices and sauces. And I have trouble going through them all because I just buy more than I can consume. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. We might have to do another show around that because my brother-in-law cooks also, and he has like gargantuous amounts of like 3 boxes full of spices. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it's like, I need this. And we're like, are you sure you don't already have it? No, I don't have the specific vinegar. Okay.
Right. Right. That one recipe that I'll never cook
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, so that's amazing. That's great to know. So tell me, you have this company called Urban Adventure Club, which I find amazing, fantastic, fabulous. And will you tell us a little bit about it, what it is?
Sure. So the Urban Adventure Club is a social club that I founded in 2015. And the goal is to help people connect, meet people who are like-minded, go on crazy fun adventures, and make real friendships. That's our goal. So we have been around since 2015. At this
Uh-huh.
point, we have over 400 paid members who go to events. We have sometimes up to 70 events every month. And we try to have events every single day. And they cover all sorts of ranges. We do dinners, happy hours, go out for hikes, go to museums, go to watch shows. And we also do trips like camping trips, backpacking trips. And last our last international trip was one I led to Japan. We spent 10 days in Tokyo and also Hakuba, where we went skiing and snowboarding. So it's just a great way to meet people, have fun, and make friends.
Yeah, okay. So, but it is a real business, and I find it so fascinating that it is, it's like, oh, it's a social club, but it's an actual business that is profitable and you're scaling. You're going from San Francisco to San Diego now,
Yes, we just
right?
started a new chapter in San Diego.
Yeah. So I want to dig into this because I've known you before you started it, I believe, and watched it transition and grow. And I mean, I don't know what you thought of it, but when you started it, I was like, okay, well, this is nice. And then it's like, whoa, I mean, you went to Japan, you do these amazing events. And so, will you tell me? I want the audience to get value out of it because it's so easy to say, hey, I started this and now it's a business, right? But there's such a pathway and so
Mm.
many struggles and so many new ways to think about it to get there. So, how did you come up with this idea, first of all?
So it came from my life, really. So I spent a lot of my 20s traveling and living abroad. I had and I lived for a few years in the Philippines. I lived in New York and I moved to San Francisco. And so, as you know, anytime you move to a new place, you pretty much have to start from zero. You have no friends or connections. And I found that to be a pretty difficult process, right? Even if when you're younger, you have all the energy. And luckily, I had something to fall back on. I was part of Ultimate Frisbee, so whenever I would move to a new place, that's a community I can plug into. However, I found that most people don't have those kind of communities. So when you move to a new city, you either try to make some friends through work, maybe your neighbors, maybe you have friends of friends. But other than that, it could be very difficult. And so I set about trying to solve that problem, helping people connect with other people who enjoy the same things. And I found Meetup. Meetup was a great platform and they had lots of options. However, I found that they weren't offering what I was looking for. because I didn't want to join a group that did the one thing and over, or one thing per month, and then maybe I have to wait for the next month for the next event. I wanted something that was more frequent, so that which is why we have events almost every single day, and also events that are different, so that way you can interact and meet different people or meet the same people in different circumstances, which really is what allows friendships to happen. So in a way, it's almost like recreating the college kind of experience where you are interacting constantly with people who are the same age, who know the same things, and through those interactions is where friendships come from.
Mm-hmm. And and then is this what you set out to do? Like when you went to college, did you have an idea that you were going to be self-employed, or you were going to do something like this, or like what was your major in college, and what happened between
Yeah.
after college?
So my major in college has nothing to do with what I do today. So I was a bio major in college, and coming from a Chinese family, the reason was they wanted me to pursue medicine. And it was something that I didn't really have a strong opinion about, but I didn't really have my own plan, so I just followed along with the plan. It wasn't until probably junior year of college, after I'd gone through a few years, I went to a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts called Williams, and I was able to take classes in all different categories and genres. So I took lots of psychology, sociology, art history, and through that, kind of opened my eyes to other possibilities besides medicine, and also just talking to people who had passions in engineering or in art history and pursuing those passions. I felt like I wanted to do something similar, and so I decided to not pursue medicine. However, I did finish my biology major and my pre-med requirements to keep my parents happy. And then I went into education. And the big reason was because I had done lots of coaching, athletic sports coaching before. I used to tutor, I used to be a mentor for kids. And I found that to be very impactful, how you can really help shape a child and point them in the right direction at an
Yeah.
early age. And so that brought me into education. I was part of the New York City Teaching Fellows program for a year. I taught in Bushwick, Brooklyn, which at that point was still quite a dangerous neighborhood. This is before the gentrification in New York. I taught math to seventh graders, and that was very eye-opening. These kids who are 12, 13 years old, and they have their lives, fully in front of them, and just having the right influences and having the right education can really change a kid's trajectory. So after that, I had the opportunity to travel abroad. So my college girlfriend, her family ended up moving back to the Philippines, and I had the opportunity to go to the Philippines. And I felt like in my mid-20s, that's the perfect time to live abroad, to discover who you are, and to see if you can, make a life for yourself. So I moved to the Philippines. I ended up working there for 3 years in education in a few different schools. That's kind of where I first caught the entrepreneurship bug. So I taught at a private college that was an entrepreneurship college. And it was really interesting because the requirement for graduation was that you had to start a business, right? If you are studying entrepreneurship, the graduation
Yes.
requirement is to start a business. And I
Yes.
thought that was fantastic. I never heard of a school that did that before. But then working there, learning from the other teachers, also just learning from that environment, really opened my eyes to entrepreneurship. Because before then, coming from New York, everyone just talks about being a lawyer, being in iBanking, right? And then I started watching content and video about people like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. And these are fantastic role models to follow if you're interested in entrepreneurship. But then they're all based in California. So then when I went back to New York, I had this idea of I want to get into technology, but I don't know if there's anything like that in New York. But luckily, I found a company that was in education technology, which I joined as was a startup. It was one of the early startups in New York around the time of Foursquare. Do you remember Foursquare?
Yes, yes.
So when Foursquare came out, they kind of launched the New York entrepreneurship and startup scene. And then I joined a company that was kind of following in their footsteps, and which then eventually brought me out to San Francisco. So I was, pursuing education technology for a few years, and then got to the point where I wanted to do something on my own because I love entrepreneurship. I can't just keep working for someone else for forever. And that's when I kind of started to think about ideas and look at different paths. Decided to take just 6 months off to figure out what I wanted to do. Right? I didn't want to decide on something right away, because I felt like that often puts you right back into the I need a job, I need an income kind of mindset. And so I took time
Uh-huh.
off to really just listen to myself, rediscover what I love to do, and try to find problems I can solve. And so that's kind of how I arrived at the idea for Urban Adventure Club, was seeing that
Uh-huh.
people struggled with making connections, making friendships, and also just having not much time available because we're all working so hard. And so I felt like creating a community like Urban Adventure Club would allow people to interact, meet other people, and make friends much more easily.
Yeah. So there's so much there. It just fascinates me that you took 6 months off and like cleared your head. That's so undervalued and understated. So because I've just what I see in your company, from who you are as the founder to what gets translated in the events and the culture. And I've never even been to one of your events. Just I briefly met you in person, and got a vibe from you, and I can see that through the company, amazingly, and through your event posts and all that, right? So I can see the value in that 6 month journey that you had, because you've been able to essentially translate what is important to you into your company and events and all the people.
Mhm.
And that is like, it is rare, I feel, and so you must have gotten something out of that, a lot of clarity out of that 6 months. um
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it was not my original idea. I learned from lots of great people before me, and a lot of the ideas came from mindfulness. So things like meditation, and basically because we're so used to the 9 to 5 schedule, the working, the working schedule, that we don't really pause to think about what we really love to do and what makes us happy. And I felt like I became disconnected from that, which is why I felt like I was not very fulfilled at my work, even though the job I had had a very good impact. Right, we're making education software for middle school and high school, so that anyone anywhere can have access to high quality content for free, and that was a great mission. However, at a certain point, it just didn't feel like I was fulfilling my own personal needs and desires, and you can't just over the weekend figure out what those are, right? That takes time and lots of reflection, lots of conversations, lots of asking yourself hard questions like, what are my values, right? What are my core beliefs? What do I want to do with my life? What am I going to be? Where am I going to be in 5, 10 years? And until you've had that distance away from work and away from that schedule, it's very hard to gain clarity on those things. You really need the time and sometimes just silence or just being on your own. So one of the things that was very impactful for me was during those 6 months, I did a lot of solo traveling. I decided to just go on a road trip by myself. I drove from San Francisco all the way to Vancouver. And then along the way, I would visit friends, right? Friends I haven't seen so long because we're so busy working that we don't have time for the closest people in our lives. And so
Yes.
through that adventure of driving on my own, listening to audiobooks, meeting friends I haven't seen in forever, and talking with them, is kind of allowed me to gain a lot more clarity on what was important to me.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. So transparent and so much deeper into the actual experience. I'm sure that will be helpful to someone. I had something similar. I was traveling. I took time off between my corporate hospital work, and then I went traveling and solo for almost 6 months. Most of it was in India. And what I experienced in that time period has led me to create my integrative physical therapy clinic now,
Mm,
which is like 15 years later. And I would have never put those two things together. But I do know when I went on that trip, I just wanted to be on my own, think on my own, just be sort of like zened out clarity
mm.
space, that is, it is just so invaluable. It's like you just don't know where that's going to lead. So I'm happy you shared in depth on that. Um, and then you talked about values. So would you touch upon, like, because you have translated so much, there's like this, I don't know how to say it. it's like this consistency of culture throughout everything from you to the event, you know? And so would you talk about how you guided yourself to make those decisions through values?
That came from a lot of reading. So I love to read nonfiction, and especially stories about great companies. So I've read, basically all the founders, like uh, the Twitter story, Amazon, Apple, and I think there's so much you can learn from their experiences. And one of the commonalities was basically the using values as your direction or as a guide to point you in the right direction. And some a recent blog post I read said something like, your values are your direction and the goals are kind of your milestones along that direction. And the reason why that was so important to me is when you're running a business or starting a business, you're pulled in so many different directions and you have 1,000 decisions to make every week. How do you decide which direction to go in, what to do and what not to do? And I think ultimately it comes back to values. Is if you're in alignment with your values, you have a clear understanding of your values, that you're always going to be moving in the right direction. And when a decision comes to you of should I do A or B, should I focus on an event that makes a lot of money, or should I focus on an event that makes no money but it's better for my members in terms of making connections? You have to go back to your values. Is if my values are about connecting people, then it's not about the money, right? If I focus on my values and connect people, the money will come later, right? If as I provide more value and build more value into the community, the money comes later. And so
Mm-hmm.
with your clear values, it's much easier to make those decisions, especially the ones that are, you know, around money or the core purpose of your company.
Yes, yes. And it's so true. It's they always say, focus on value in the product, but I think you've really honed it down to more of a humanistic like way of thinking of, okay, what is the value, and then you use that as your guiding system. And you're living proof. You have a social company that focuses on connection, that's one of your values, and you're profitable, you're making money,
Mhm.
so. And if for me, I look at it and I go, this is a company. Like, it just shocks me still that it's so amazing, that you took something that's so important to people and figured out how to help people, yet still be profitable, which is important because you need to live, you need to be fulfilled, you need to be happy, you have a family, you have needs. Everybody, it's okay to make profit. That's not the point. The point is, are you doing something that's fulfilling? And if you want to contribute, are you meeting that,
Mhm.
And oh, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then you had also touched upon, well, no, I'm going to ask you that later. But the other part I find so fascinating is when I go to something like social events, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of times people want to go because they're introverts. They don't really meet people, they don't know how
Mhm.
to meet people, right? You feel odd. And so when you go to a social event, you can kind of get lost, you don't feel comfortable. But you've actually thought about that and have things in line so that you are addressing that problem, just like it's like a sub problem of the connection problem. And
Mhm.
I just think that's so great. Will you speak about that?
Yeah, this is something that I think really distinguishes UAC or Urban Adventure Club from other groups. And this is something I set out to do from the very beginning because I understood how difficult it can be for someone, even an extrovert, to go to a meeting or an event where they don't know anyone.
Yeah.
So for a while, as you probably know, there are tons of networking events in the Bay Area for entrepreneurs and startups. And I've been to so many where I walk in and there's a room full of 40, 50 people, all in small group conversations, and you just have no idea where to start, right? Who do I go to
Yes.
talk to? There's no one here to tell me where to go, what to do. And luckily, I'm an extrovert, so it's not a big deal for me to go up to a group of people and start talking. However, I can recognize that for most people, that is a very awkward situation, and most people might be like, "I don't feel comfortable. I'm gonna leave."
Yes.
And the same thing for social events. If you go to a happy hour, you see 20 people all talking to each other, where do you go? And so for me, I wanted to change that experience. I wanted to give everyone a easy way to get into an event, introduce themselves to each other, and to make sure that they're interacting with lots of people. And so the way we do that is, number one, before you even come to the event, when you register, sign up for a membership or register for an event, is you'll hear from us, or either from me or one of the organizers for the event. Number one, we want you to know that, hey, we know you're here and we welcome you, and we're looking forward to seeing you. Right. So that you can't believe how few people even do that. Right. So of all the events that people sign up
So
for on
true.
Meetup, on Eventbrite, the organizer, or the host, never messages the people who signed up, because, well, that kind of shows that maybe they don't care as much. And so for me, is I wanted to make sure that, when you sign up for my event, that we care and we're looking forward to seeing you. And then when you arrive at the event, we usually create a group conversation for all the members who are attending, so you are all in one chat. So that way we can share information, updates, or if we change locations, if we change times, you know right away what has happened, and you have a way of also knowing who the other people going. And then when you arrive at the event, there's a host that's there to welcome you. So usually someone who is a member or someone who is actual organizer, and they will, help you find the group, welcome you to the group, make sure that everyone has a chance to introduce themselves, share a little bit about themselves, and then get into the event and the conversation. Once you have that, once you are welcome into the event and have, shared your name and information about yourself with people, it's much easier to open up and be vulnerable and
Yeah.
be in that flow of conversation. And you're going to walk away feeling much better, because you're able to talk to lots of people, meet different people, learn it from and learn about other people. And that's just a much better experience than trying to go into an event and figure it out on your own.
Yeah. Especially when you're there to meet people. And then it's like, it's just hard even doing that. And so someone is like meeting you halfway. I mean, and well thought out, like it's so well thought out, and it's like, no wonder you're successful, because you've really, really thought about lots of different situations that people may be in. And I think the introvert market is untapped. Like it's just, people just don't, you know, think about that. And also, and then you can tell me about this. I feel that there is a level of compassion and empathy in you that shows up as this product. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think empathy is critical for any entrepreneur, because to build a business, to satisfy your customers, you have to deeply understand your customers and who you're trying to serve, and the problems that they have. And so even though at this point we have hundreds of different members all over the Bay Area, for me, the most important way for me to find out about my members and what they want is to talk to them, right? I still host 2-3 events every week. I still meet my members face to face, virtually or in person. And I often just ask them, right, ask them to their face, like, what is it you need? What are the problems that you face, and how can we help you solve them? And by doing that repeatedly with hundreds of different people, you have a much deeper understanding of their problems. I think many entrepreneurs may have this conception of, I'm solving my problem, I know my problem, so here's a solution. However, your problem is not the same as everyone else's problem. And there's always a little bit of difference between everyone. And so
Yes.
you need to understand the problem from multiple angles and multiple perspectives to really
Yeah.
come up with a solution that can work for more than just yourself. And I think that's something that really helped kind of guide how UAC is. It's just constantly talking with members and learning from them.
So I feel so that was like more of the business aspect of it, but I want to ask you on a personal level, do you think you are, well, I know, I mean, I'm not going to say it, I'm going to have you say it. The empathy side of you on your personal level before you had UAC, do you think that you already had that? Or I mean, you cultivated it and grew in that? Or did it just start when you had UAC or started focusing more on it?
I think it's always been a kind of a path in life, I think. I don't think anyone is born instantly super empathetic. I think it's something that we build and we develop as we age. I do remember that there's a big change in myself from going from high school to college, and then also from college and beyond. I think every stage of life, you just based on the people that you meet and the different experiences you have, you start developing more empathy for people. And I think travel, right, it's one of the best ways to develop that, because you're seeing people from completely different cultures, a complete different language or ways of living,
Yes.
and understanding that everyone has value, everyone has something to offer, something to learn from. And
Yes.
that's what I bring to, all my interactions, is every time I meet a new member is, you have an interesting life, right? Even if you don't think you do, I think I will find it interesting because it's just different from mine. And there's so much more I can learn from you. And I think just carrying that through the club and the values that we have and how we interact and how we help people interact with each other is always trying to discover something that maybe you don't normally share with people. So one of the
Mhm.
common questions I ask people is, what is something that might surprise me about you? Right? Because we're so used
Mhm.
to judging people based on appearance and first impressions, but there's so much about some people that you might be completely shocked by. Right. So just as a one simple question can open up so many different lines of conversation.
Yeah, that's great. So I think when something is very innate in us, we don't maybe recognize it, but I think empathy must, I don't want to say it's like you said, you develop it, but you have a strong empathy side to you because, and you've nurtured it and, grew as a
Mm,
person. And I'm so glad that you said how you said it. As first, you started with the business empathetic virtue, because there's so many entrepreneurs and business owners that do not think empathy is necessary. They do not connect
mm,
solving the customer's problem and understanding their needs as from an empathetic state. It's like, okay, let me just understand my target market, my target customer avatar, and then I just need to go solve that. It's like, but then when you see the situation, there's a lot of judgment and a lot of other stuff that you're filtering through. But having a strong empathetic side lets gives you more clarity, lets you see things more, so that you can help all kinds of customers. And there's like a generic need, but there's like the introvert, and there's like other stuff that you're probably like extroverts, how to help them, right?
mm.
And so I just wanted to touch on that because I don't think everybody realizes that how much empathy is very a positive, strong characteristics to have, characteristic to have as an entrepreneur, and how it actually can be applicable on the business side versus just solving the
Yes.
problem. So thank you.
Yeah. One of the books that had a big influence on me before I started the company was this book called The Lean Startup. And in it describes a process for evaluating business ideas. And one of the first ones is talk to your customers, right? Before you even think about what a line of code to write or a business plan, talk to the people that you think have the problems that you want to solve, right? Because I think it's so easy to in our own heads to create like, oh, we have this problem, we can build this product, and all of a sudden it's going to be adopted by millions of people, and I'll be a
Right.
billionaire, right? But and they have not even talked to a single other person about.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first thing is, number one, you'll find out whether other people share the problem, right? And also
Mhm.
if they share the same one or a slightly different one, and also maybe if they're even willing to pay for the product. So having
Yeah.
having
And
those conversations early on will give you much more information to work off of than just trying to come up with a business plan out of nothing.
yeah, and just what you think, yeah,
Yeah.
you think you, but I feel like the thing is the idea, but then you need to make the connection to the human side. And that the great way, like you said, is to talk to people. So before you started your company, how did you talk to people and figure out stuff? Was there
So
anything?
initially, I've been talking to people for years, even before I started the company. So like I said, I started really thinking about entrepreneurship when I was living in the Philippines, teaching in that school. And then when I came back to New York, I joined a startup. And that was basically a crash course on entrepreneurship and startups, learning from the inside how things function and how teams work, how fundraising works, and all these little things that you are not familiar with coming from corporate lifestyle or even education type of environment. And then coming to the Bay Area, meeting all sorts of entrepreneurs, especially people in ed tech. I would go to networking events all the time and to meet other people, talk about business. I even had a failed business at one point. So I went to a hackathon event and met
Uh-huh.
a team of great guys. We came up with a product. We hacked on it over a weekend. Came in second place, but we thought it was a good enough idea to move forward with. So our idea
Uh-huh.
was to help teachers who are in high need schools. So I was a teacher in a high need school. A couple of my teammates on that team were teachers in high need schools, and our issues were we often didn't have the resources from the school in terms of getting supplies like paper, pencils, pens, to really give all the kids what they needed to excel. And
Mm-hmm.
we felt like, why don't we leverage the internet and crowdsourcing to provide these teachers with what they need? And so our
Uh-huh.
idea was to build a platform for that. However, the lesson we learned from that experience is we were right. We suffered from the issue I talked about earlier. We didn't talk to enough customers. We didn't talk to enough teachers. We thought we knew what other teachers wanted, and
Uh-huh.
we built something, and then we showed it to teachers, and they didn't want to use it.
Wow.
And we didn't know why. And then until later, we found after we talked to more teachers, we found out actually I don't as a teachers are very strong-minded people, and they love their own independence, and they don't feel like asking for money. Right? That's a fundamental thing that we didn't even think about when we started this company. We thought, oh, all teachers should have no problem to asking, their friends and family for money. Like, wait a minute, actually, we don't even want to do that. So
Yeah.
that was a big disconnect. We weren't empathetic enough. We didn't understand the problem well enough
Mm-hmm.
to really build something that worked. So
Mm-hmm.
that that those lessons carry on to UAC and my future endeavors.
Yes. And then you had also shared with me about uh, you guys focused more on like the legal team and all that stuff. But when you started UAC, you had learned something about that you didn't
Yeah,
make the
because
same
we
mistake.
fell in the trapping of a startup. You need equity, right? You need titles. Who's going to be CEO? Who's going to be COO? Who's going to have what percent of equity? And how are we going to structure in terms of financing? And all these things are at the end of the day not important, right? Because we didn't even solve a single person's problem before we started thinking about these things. We wasted so much time on these, on talking to lawyers and potentially partners with VC firms. At the end of the day, we didn't have a product that people wanted to use. And so when I started UAC, I took the complete opposite approach: is don't do anything that's not actually solving someone's problem. And until I have enough people that are happy to have me solve their problems, I don't have a business. I have nothing. And then basically I started growing UAC just from the membership from the day one is how many people can I help by connecting them directly. Once I had enough of a following and regular members, now I can start thinking about business, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much to charge, what to charge, the structure of the company. That all came later after I already
Mm-hmm.
had momentum in the group.
Mm-hmm. And thank you. And you also had a very actually profitable, not even cost effective way of gathering research by being a
Right.
driver, right?
Yeah, that was in 2015. So Lyft and Uber were fairly new, and it was something that people were using quite a bit. And I read the story. I think it was might have been the New York Times about a Uber driver in New York who used the Ubers as a way to sell jewelry, and he built a six-figure business just selling jewelry to his customers in Uber. And I
Wow.
felt like that's a great way of using the service. You're basically getting paid by people and then you're selling them a product at the same time. So I
Yeah.
decided, you know what, I'm going to sign up for Lyft, drive around, have people pay me, and then do my user research. So that every time someone got in my car, I would ask them questions like, where do you go out to? How do you socialize? Who do you socialize with? What are your patterns? And these are just kind of casual conversations you have with people in Lyft anyway. And so for about 2 months, I did this. I had probably hundreds of conversations with people where I was getting paid. And so
Yeah.
I learned so much from that experience. And also because I was talking to people who were my friends, were strangers, they had no reason to, lie to me or
Yes.
make me feel good. They were honest, like, hey, this is what I do, this is how I do it. And that was
Yes.
just valuable research.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just had a thought about one of my businesses was like a social networking sort of dating events business I had in LA. And we started it on a napkin at my girlfriend's wedding. And I remember I said, what better place to go do market research than at a reception? So I
Mm,
started going up to all the men, which was one of them was my husband before I even like knew him. I
wow.
walked up to him and I was like, so what do you think about the women here? And like you said, he wasn't my friend, so I could just start asking, right? And I just annoyed him. And I said, so what, what kind of women do you get attracted to? And why aren't you going up to anybody and talking to them? And
Uh-huh,
he said it was
uh-huh.
really obnoxious, but I did a lot of research that night. And you're right, just talking to people, especially not your friends. I feel like when you're starting something, um, it's okay, I think, to talk to friends, but also you got to know if it's your target market,
Mm,
and also way that, you know, they may know you, but that's different than a customer telling you something. So you got to kind of be careful,
yeah,
because sometimes you can get weighed down from friends' opinions of like, oh, this isn't such a great idea, or I was thinking of this or something, right? So yeah,
yeah, yeah,
you gotta
yeah.
differentiate for
Yeah, I
sure.
would advise to number one, do not talk to your parents about it. Well, especially in my case, my parents would never, be happy with me trying to do something entrepreneurial. They would just love me to have a stable six-figure job, and that'd be the end of it. And so
Yes.
I know to not talk to my parents about it. Also, I don't want to talk to my friends about it because for them, they want to not make me upset or not, be harsh
Uh-huh.
with me. So I think the best people to go to were actually friends of friends or acquaintances because they're just distant enough that they know you, but
Mhm.
they're also distant enough that they're willing to be honest and
Mhm.
and also talk to as many people as you could. I mean, as you can. So I have probably talked to hundreds of people while driving Lyft, but also interviewed probably 50 or more friends of friends. And these were a little more in-depth interviews, about half hour, and I would, take them for coffee or beer or something. But those were also super insightful because I can dive into a lot more of the nitty-gritty details about, how much do you spend when you go out, right? And these are things that maybe a stranger wouldn't tell you, but a friend of a
Yeah.
friend, might. And so I think just talking to a different range of people will help you give you a lot more better perspective.
Would you just say to like friends of friends, do you just say straight up, "Hey, I'm starting a company and I want to pick your brain"? Like, why would somebody come out? Like, how did you do that?
I think, well, I mean, mostly I ask people who I feel like would be okay with it. So these aren't, these are people I would have met a few times or have had a good conversation with, or I was playing Ultimate Frisbee, so a few teammates who I know them, I would call them friends, but we're not very close. So
Mhm.
that I think those types of people were the ones that gave me the most insight
Yeah.
because
Great.
they were just slightly different from me because your
Yeah.
closest friends are pretty much very much like you, so you're probably not going to gain as much insight from them because they're more
Mhm.
like you.
Right. So I have to ask this because I come from a family where uh, stable income would be valued also versus going out with crazy ideas and entrepreneurship. So how was the journey with your parents, and then like now you're definitely not just Uber driving and getting research and zero income from the business. So how is it now? Are they happy? Are they okay? Or it's still, let's see. Because
Yeah,
parents can have
it's a
high
funny experience with
expectations.
my parents.
Sorry,
So
go ahead.
so basically I don't tell them anything until I'm ready to tell them. So they didn't know for a while that I had quit my job and decided to take 6 months off and rediscover myself because they would not
Yeah.
be happy with that. And I think I probably told them that I started something probably like 6 months after I started it because at
Uh-huh.
that point I had some momentum. I felt like this was going the right direction. It wasn't, I wasn't going to go to them before I had nothing. When I had nothing, oh, I'm doing this thing. I have zero members and no income, right? So
Yes.
I waited a while to tell them. Of course, my parents are very supportive, so I'm very lucky in that way. Is they would never say no, you can't do this, and we will disown you or anything like that. But they're
Yes.
definitely very cautious. They will always tell me, you have a backup, which is to get another job. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that you're not doing anything illegal, or that's always their worry. And so, but their sense was always he's going to give up at some point and get another job and we'll be happy. But it was maybe a few years later, once it was a business and I was supporting myself, that
Yeah.
they felt better. Like, hey, okay, you're not starving, you're not living on the streets, but also you're not making a lot of money. So think about getting another job, right?
Yes.
They kept doing that. It wasn't until I think probably 4 or 5 years in when I started showing them like, hey, I'm actually making a profit. This is a good business
Yes.
and it's growing. So they started to like, okay, maybe you have something here.
Yes.
And the funny story is my mom for a long time just did not believe in entrepreneurship. She felt like, 50% of business close and the failure rate is so high. And I have this friend who has gone through so many failed businesses. The
Yeah.
funny thing is, it wasn't until she talked to that friend who had the failed businesses that he said, yeah, if I had a son, I would want him to be like yours because I want my son
Oh,
to pursue entrepreneurship, even if it means failure, even if it means, not being financially successful, because that's just the way he wants to live. And I think that
yeah.
kind of changed my mom's mind. She came, at one point she called me. It's like, I don't understand what you're doing, and I'm worried about you, but you have my support. And
Oh,
that really changed the dynamic between us, because after that I could be much more open about talking about the business, like talking about the members, the events that we do. And eventually, once I married my wife who I met in the club, that also turned her towards it. It's like, oh, you now have a stable life. She has a really good job, so she's less worried about us as a couple. Yeah, but it took a long time for my parents to come around.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. So honestly, you're much more wiser. Like, why didn't I think about that? Not to tell my parents until 6 months later. No, I mean, I quit my job in corporate hospital, and my parents thought I was crazy too to travel and whatever. And they were like, "Oh, she'll come back eventually and she'll do stuff." And then I would just always tell them, and then they were just like, okay, well, we'll see. You have a degree in physical therapy, so we'll see. You have a backup, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, I mean, if, for example, like I'm always doing stuff. Like my parents have no idea that I have this show yet. I have not told them. They're going to be like, "Why are you doing this? How is
Mm.
this going to help your financial situation?" Right? So I haven't even told them. So now I will do the Andy way. 6 months later,
Yeah. So
they're
once
gonna
you
have
have a lots of followers, like, okay, this is something. Yeah.
yeah, they're gonna be like, so what does that mean? My dad is literally gonna be like, and what does that mean? Meaning, how is this like valuable in your life? So but I appreciate, like you said, for your parents too. Like they're just looking out for you. They mean well. They want you to explore. It's almost like they're like a backup grounding of like, hey, just remember, like this is the
Yeah.
whole picture too. And
Yeah.
it's nice to have, because the entrepreneur pathway usually is not easy. That you have times
No.
when you doubt yourself. I mean, you want to give up, you get sad, depressed. I mean, was it a so I always like to bring this up because in it always, when I listen to things, I was like, wow, that sounded so easy, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I know that life is not always like that. So did you have your moments of struggle? Were you ever sad, depressed, or anything like that? Did you have the ups and downs?
I I think most entrepreneurs can tell you the same thing, that it is the biggest roller coaster you can ever get on. One day you feel on top of the world. I just had this amazing event. All the attendees loved it, and I have a business and it's gonna be great. The next
Yeah.
day, my event doesn't have half the signups that I thought it would. And am I doing the right thing? Should I give up? And you're just oscillating through that over and over. But the thing is, luckily, I because I had before starting the business, understood my values and my purpose, and had done a lot of exercise and mindfulness and meditation. I was able to kind of soften the high, kind of not I guess not be too high, but also never be too low, and
Yes.
always kind of operate within a range of knowing, today's just another day, right? If today wasn't great, I can do what I can to make tomorrow better. And just knowing that is a marathon. It's not going to pay off
Mhm.
immediately, right? You hear the fairy tale stories of, oh, so and so had this idea, all of a sudden they got investments of millions of dollars and this and that. Like extremely rare, right? Most entrepreneurs will struggle long for years before they see real success.
Mhm.
But I think the other most important thing is understanding that just life in general is a struggle, right? Either you're struggling doing something you don't like to do or you hate to do, or you struggle doing something you love. And not
Mhm.
me knowing that I get to work on my idea that I'm passionate about, that I love, that I feel like making a great impact, that pushed me forward, right?
Mhm.
I'm happy. I never worked harder in my life in the first few years of starting UAC, but knowing the impact I was having, that the freedom of doing what I wanted to do was what drove me forward, right? My fear was going back to the office and working 9 to 5.
Mhm.
That's what drove me.
Yes. So you had your what, like you had your value driven for the business, the connection that guided you, and then in your personal, you had your the love for freedom to wanting to have that value in your life that kept you going, kept you focused. So there's just not one. You actually need both for your personal inner journey and then for the business. And so yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
I forget where I found this term. I think it might have been a Tim Ferriss book. It was called lifestyle design. I hadn't heard of that before because before you kind of assume your life is a work, your life away from work, and they're kind of separated. Whereas
Mhm.
the concept of lifestyle design is work is just part of your life, and you want to design your life in a way that your work is in alignment with your values and also what you love to do. And so, in a way, my work is how I socialize. It's how I meet new people, right? When I host events, it's how I met my wife. Most of my best friends in the Bay Area, I met through the club. So that was a great alignment. And also, it's flexible. I work from home. I've been working from home since 2015. I can work when I want to. I can take time off when I want to. And that for me was the most important thing, is not being told where to be and when to be, right? Having meetings that I find pointless, then just having the ability to say, well, to do what I
Mhm.
want to do each day, even if it's a lot of work. That level of freedom and flexibility, it was what I ultimately wanted.
Yeah, and it's also thank you for sharing that. Also, it's like how you said, if you on the one side, on the business side of if you create value in the product, the money will come. And I also think in the interpersonal, if you keep going after the thing that's most important to you, the freedom, you will get innovative to create what you need to create to make it work. But you got to know that. You got to
Mm,
know what it is because there's so much stuff that comes up in the space of entrepreneurship and business that you got to know your two north stars for sure because then the money will come because if you love freedom that much, you want to be home. Like a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, you know uh, they really get into it because of the freedom, and the ironic part is you're your own boss. So you got to keep your own self accountable. You actually work a lot more than you probably would at another job,
mm,
at a job, like you said, but you don't mind because,
no.
like, maybe like you work and then you go to the park with the kids or go for your own ice cream break or the gym and then you come back. And it's like, why you're doing it. So you don't even keep track of the hours and you eventually get better enough to create like some sort of a malleable schedule that serves your life, so then it's like you're not even really working, you know so
Yeah, I think the number one I want to also clarify is it is a ton of work, right? I think I early on I was probably working 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. But the thing is, when you are so passionate and involved in what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work, right? It doesn't feel like I'm
yes.
doing something for someone else that I don't personally care about, because I know by creating this event, planning it, I'm going to impact 15 to 20 people and help create new friendships. And that's the outcome, right? If I know the outcome of the work I'm putting into is so much more rewarding.
Hmm.
However, knowing the flexibility part is, right, if I have to go to, to the dentist or do something else, I don't have to take time off from work, right? It's just kind of everything can fit together. Is this is
Yes.
work, this is doing errands, this is personal time. And I think the most important thing is also knowing when to take time off and recharge, because you can't burn the candle at both ends all the time. and having that flexibility of knowing right now the best thing for me to do is just go take a walk in the park, right? Even though I have lots of things to do, right? I have projects and tasks to do, but for my personal well-being, for my happiness, I'm going to go take a walk in the park. And then you come
Hmm.
back feeling better and recharged because you have that freedom to do those kind of things.
Yeah, that is so good that you shared that because everyone focuses so much on that to-do list and forgets that the recharge is so powerful, especially when you're the business owner, founder. Like that list is just pretty much never ending and it never will be ending,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
and you should be okay with that if you really love what you do, and but there's such a healthy way to do that. And I wanted to ask a little deeper into that because for me, I feel like you have such a zenness around you. Do you spend a lot of time recharging, would you say?
I
Or
do.
are you?
Do. Yeah. I wouldn't call it recharging necessarily.
Uh-huh.
I spend time pursuing things that bring me joy or keep me active. So one of the newer hobbies I picked up is golf. And there's a driving range that's about 20 minutes away from me. And I find that to be such a way to just detach, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes you're struggling with a problem or a project and you're just so deep into it that it's making you unhappy or miserable. You're like, I don't know what to do right now. And I find in those times, the best thing is to get away from it. I'll just take my
Mhm.
golf bag, drive over there, put my headphones on. I'm just kind of focus on this thing that's out, nothing to do with work, and that's somewhat
Mhm.
physical and kind of gets me moving. And usually you work out that stress, right? And
Mhm.
by the end of the hour of hitting balls on the range, I come back feeling better. I have endorphins, right, from the activity. I've detached myself from the problem, and then also that just detaching, you kind of realize it's not life or death, right? If I don't solve this problem today, it's okay. I can come back to it
Mhm.
tomorrow, right? Um, and also being detached or being away often will give you a different perspective or different way of thinking about the problem, right? You can come, right? It's the whole story about you take a shower and all of a sudden your best ideas come out, right? It's by
Yeah.
being away from the problem, often you'll allow your mind to marinate and come up with solutions you would have never thought of.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those are such great words. Detach, marinate, you know, not just rejuvenate, there's so many ways to think about it, so many different pathways to get back into what I just call like a state of flow or zenness. So, and Zen may not look Zen, but flow we understand. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, and then I wanted to, you know, one of the reasons I have this show is that I like to share stories about people's life of like what success looks like for someone else, because it's not always about materialism and how much you make and the cars and the house. I actually feel like if you're doing what you love and um, you feel good about it and you have a life the way you live your life, so not lifestyle but the way you live your life of like, hey, if I need to get away from a work problem, I go play golf, or I go for a walk, or I just play with my kid or sit down on the carpet and meditate, and
Mhm.
you're able to just do your things that you'd love to do. I feel like that is success. And then also the important part is fulfillment, not just like success is empty, I feel, without fulfillment. So
Mhm.
do you feel where you are, what you've created so far in the journey, do you feel you have some level of fulfillment in what you are, how you're living and what you have with your company?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was something I strived for from the beginning was feeling fulfilled. Like I mentioned earlier, when I was at my last job, I didn't feel that sense of fulfillment, even though the mission of the company was great. I was making good salary. I was living very comfortably. There's nothing missing really from my life besides this one little nagging thing of I could be doing something more. I should be doing something different. And so now I feel like I'm on that path that's in complete alignment with my values and how I want to live my life. So one thing I that I found to be super impactful was a few years ago. I believe it was like a Tony Robbins audio tape. He had this exercise of imagine your perfect day 5 years from now. So this is kind of one of those close your eyes and just really deeply imagine your life. And I imagined a day or perfect day, and which started with waking up when I wanted to wake up, not to an alarm, and then enjoy a slow morning where I do some work in the morning, have lunch, either go out for lunch, and the afternoon is kind of free. If I want to do more work, I'll do more work. Otherwise, I'll go do something active like play golf or tennis, and then enjoy the evening with my wife or and with friends over good food, nice wine, and then relax the evening, and go on the next day. And that was kind of like my perfect day back all the way back then. And then I remember a couple years ago, I woke up one day and I realized I had that life. Right? It was what I imagined 5 years ago is what I had. And
Yeah.
so, right, that's fulfillment. It's I was able to live the way I want to live, not feeling like, I'm working for someone else on something I don't believe in, and also just being having the flexibility and freedom to do the things that brought me joy and happiness.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's important to actually have an idea of what fulfillment looks like. So even if you're watching this in the audience, like, you could just take a piece of paper, like you said, and then just write out what would your greatest day look like or ideal day look like, and that just kind of gives you clarity. And I've done this before. I've done an exercise like this where I do it actually